Sarah Mitchell had worked at Buckingham Palace for 15 years. She started as a young woman fresh out of university, dreaming of serving the crown. Now at 37, she was the deputy private secretary to His Majesty King Charles III. Her days were filled with organizing royal schedules, managing correspondence, and ensuring the smooth running of palace operations. The morning of October 12th began like any other. Sarah arrived at the palace at 7 sharp, her heels clicking against the marble floors of the corridor leading to her office. The autumn air was crisp, and golden leaves danced outside the tall windows. She had no idea that this day would change everything she thought she knew about the royal family. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell," called James, one of the senior footmen, as he polished the brass doorknobs with practiced precision. "His Majesty requested to see you in the blue drawing room at 9 o'clock. Sarah nodded, checking her watch. She had an hour to prepare whatever documents the king might need. It wasn't unusual for Charles to request private meetings, but something in James's tone suggested this wasn't a routine discussion about garden party arrangements or charity patronages. In her office, Sarah reviewed the day's schedule. The king had no public engagements planned, which was rare. Prince William was expected to arrive at 10 for what the calendar simply listed as private family meeting. No other details were provided, which struck Sarah as odd. Usually, every royal engagement was meticulously planned and documented. At exactly 9 o'clock, Sarah knocked on the door of the blue drawing room. The room was one of her favorites in the palace, with its elegant powder blue silk wall coverings and magnificent chandelier that had witnessed centuries of royal history. King Charles was standing by the window, looking out at the gardens where his late mother had once walked. "Your Majesty," Sarah said, offering a small curtsy. "Sarah, please sit down," Charles said, turning from the window. His face was serious, more grave than she had seen in months. "I need to discuss something with you, and I must have your absolute discretion." "Of course, Your Majesty. You have my complete confidence." Charles walked to his desk and picked up a small, ancient-looking wooden box. The box appeared to be made of dark oak, with intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story Sarah couldn't quite decipher. The king held it carefully, as if it contained something incredibly precious. "Do you know what this is, Sarah?" he asked, holding the box toward her. Sarah studied it carefully. She had seen many royal artifacts during her years at the palace, but this box was unfamiliar. "I'm afraid I don't, Your Majesty." Charles opened the box slowly, revealing a ring unlike any Sarah had ever seen. It wasn't the typical royal jewelry she was accustomed to seeing. This ring was older, more mysterious. The band appeared to be made of ancient gold, darkened with age, and set with a deep blue stone that seemed to capture and hold the light from the chandelier above. "This is the sovereign's ring," Charles said quietly. "It has been passed down through the royal family for over 800 years. Most people don't know it exists. It's not part of the crown jewels that the public sees. This ring represents something far more personal, far more sacred than any crown or scepter." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. In all her years of service, she had never heard mention of such a ring. "What does it represent, Your Majesty?" "The true responsibility of kingship," Charles replied, sitting across from her. "When a monarch wears this ring, they accept not just the privilege of the crown, but the burden of truly serving the people." It was first worn by King Henry III, and it has been passed from parent to child at moments of great significance ever since. The king closed the box gently and set it on the table between them. "Sarah, I need you to arrange something very specific, and it must be done with absolute secrecy. I want you to prepare the throne room for a private ceremony this afternoon. Just myself, William, and you as witness. No other staff, no photographers, no record in the official diary." Sarah's mind raced. A secret ceremony in the throne room was unprecedented in her experience. "May I ask what the ceremony involves, Your Majesty?" Charles was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming softly on the armrest of his chair. "I'm going to pass the sovereign's ring to William. It's time." The words hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. She had served the royal family long enough to understand the significance of such a moment. This wasn't about a simple transfer of jewelry. This was about the future of the monarchy itself. "Your Majesty, forgive me, but this seems significant beyond measure. Are you certain you want only myself as witness?" "I am certain," Charles said firmly. This ceremony is not about pomp or public relations. It's about family, about continuity, about preparing my son for what lies ahead. You have served this family with unwavering loyalty, Sarah. I trust you completely. Sarah felt the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders. What exactly would you need me to do? Simply be present and ensure we are not disturbed. This conversation between William and myself needs to happen without any interference. The palace staff will be told that we're having a private family discussion and are not to be interrupted under any circumstances. As Charles spoke, Sarah noticed something in his expression she had never seen before. It wasn't sadness exactly, but a kind of profound seriousness that suggested he was making one of the most important decisions of his reign. There are words that must be spoken, Charles continued, traditions that must be observed. This ring has been passed down with the same ceremony for centuries. The words spoken by each king to his heir are never recorded, never shared beyond the family. Today, you will hear those words. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. To be present for such an intimate and historic moment felt almost too significant for her to comprehend. Your Majesty, I am deeply honored by your trust, but are you certain this should not be witnessed by someone more senior? Charles shook his head. Seniority in the palace hierarchy means nothing for this ceremony. What matters is trust, discretion, and understanding of what the monarchy truly means. You have all three qualities. He stood and walked back to the window, looking out at the grounds where tourists were already gathering for the changing of the guard. My mother held on to this ring until she was 96 years old. She passed it to me just days before her death, in a private moment that no one else witnessed. The weight of that moment, Sarah, the responsibility that came with that ring, it changed everything. Sarah remained silent, understanding that the king was sharing something deeply personal. Now it's time for me to pass that responsibility to William. He's ready, more ready than I was when I received it. He understands duty in a way that gives me great peace. Charles returned to his seat and picked up the box again. When William arrives, I'll bring him to the throne room. You should be there waiting. Position yourself near the far wall, where you can observe but remain unobtrusive. What you witness today must never be discussed with anyone, not your family, not your colleagues, not even with William or myself, unless we specifically raise the topic. I understand completely, Your Majesty. One more thing, Sarah. After the ceremony, I'll need you to update William's security clearance. He'll need access to certain documents, certain rooms in the palace that have been restricted until now. The ring comes with knowledge as well as responsibility. Sarah nodded, though her mind was spinning with questions she knew she couldn't ask. What documents? What rooms? How much of royal life had she never even glimpsed despite her years of service? As if reading her thoughts, Charles smiled slightly. You'll understand more after today. The monarchy has layers, Sarah, depths that even long-serving staff rarely see. Today you'll see one of those deeper layers. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Enter, Charles called. James appeared in the doorway. Your Majesty, the Prince of Wales has arrived and is waiting in the green drawing room. Perfect timing. Sarah, please go to the throne room now and ensure we have absolute privacy. I'll bring William in 10 minutes. Sarah rose and curtsied. Yes, Your Majesty, you can count on me. As she walked toward the throne room, Sarah's heart was racing. In 10 minutes, she would witness something that perhaps a dozen people in the past 8 centuries had ever seen. The magnitude of the trust placed in her was overwhelming. The throne room was empty and silent, its red and gold decorations gleaming in the afternoon light that streamed through the tall windows. Sarah positioned herself where Charles had suggested, near the far wall, where she would have a clear view but remain as unobtrusive as possible. She thought about her 15 years of service, all the royal events she had helped coordinate, all the ceremonies she had witnessed. None of them had prepared her for this moment. This wasn't about public duty or state occasions. This was about the very heart of what it meant to be royal, about traditions so old and sacred that they were hidden from the world. As she waited, Sarah wondered what words Charles would speak to his son. What wisdom was passed down with that ancient ring? What burdens would William accept when he placed it on his finger? The sound of footsteps in the corridor signaled that the most extraordinary moment of her career was about to begin. The double doors of the throne room opened with a soft creak that seemed to echo through centuries of royal history. King Charles entered first, carrying the ancient wooden box with both hands, treating it like the sacred relic it was. Prince William followed just behind him, his expression serious and contemplative. Sarah had seen William in many settings over the years, but never quite like this. There was something different about his posture, his demeanor, as if he already sensed the gravity of what was about to unfold. Charles closed the doors behind them with deliberate care, then turned the old-fashioned key in the lock. The click of the mechanism seemed to seal them into their own private world, separate from the bustling palace beyond. Sarah remained perfectly still against the far wall, understanding that she was about to witness something truly extraordinary. "William," Charles said, his voice carrying clearly across the vast room, "thank you for coming without questions. What I'm about to share with you has been kept within our family for generations beyond memory." William nodded, his blue eyes fixed intently on his father. "Of course, Papa, though I have to admit the secrecy has me curious." Charles smiled slightly at his son's honesty. "Your curiosity will be satisfied, but first I need you to understand the weight of what I'm about to offer you. This isn't simply a family tradition or a symbolic gesture. What happens in this room today will change your understanding of what it means to be king." The two men stood facing each other, in front of the thrones that had seated British monarchs for generations. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows cast long shadows across the red carpet, creating an almost cathedral-like atmosphere in the room. Charles placed the wooden box on a small table that had been positioned between the two main thrones. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing the sovereign's ring once again. In the natural light of the throne room, the ancient gold seemed to glow with an inner fire, and the deep blue stone appeared to hold depths that Sarah couldn't fathom. "My God," William breathed, leaning forward to get a better look. "I've never seen anything like it. How old is it?" "Give or take a decade," Charles replied. "It was first worn by King Henry III in 1245. Since then, it has passed from parent to child in an unbroken chain. Your grandmother gave it to me just days before she died, in a ceremony much like this one." William's eyes widened with understanding. "I had no idea. Grandmother never mentioned it. Because it wasn't time," Charles explained. "The ring comes with knowledge, William, but also with burdens. The person who wears this ring accepts a responsibility that goes beyond what the public sees, beyond what even most of our staff knows. It's a commitment to something deeper than duty as the world understands it." Sarah watched as William studied the ring more closely, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. She could see him beginning to grasp the magnitude of what his father was offering him. "Papa, are you abdicating?" William asked quietly. Charles shook his head firmly. "No, not at all. I am still your king and will remain so. But the sovereign's ring is different from the crown. It represents the future, the continuity of our family's commitment to the British people. By giving it to you now, I'm acknowledging that you are ready to begin carrying the deepest responsibilities of kingship, even while I continue to reign." "I don't understand the distinction," William admitted. Charles picked up the ring from its velvet bed in the box, holding it up to the light. "When I wear the crown, I am the king in the public eye. When I wear this ring, I am the keeper of secrets, the guardian of traditions, the holder of knowledge that has been passed down through our bloodline for nearly a millennium. Today, I'm asking you to become my partner in that guardianship." William was quiet for a long moment, processing his father's words. Sarah could see the internal struggle playing out across his face. This was clearly not what he had expected when he arrived at the palace that morning. "What kind of secrets?" William finally asked. "The kind that keep a monarchy strong across centuries," Charles replied. "The locations of documents that must never be lost. The names of people whose families have served ours in ways the public will never know. The knowledge of why certain decisions were made, decisions that changed the course of history but were never recorded in any official record." Charles moved closer to his son, lowering his voice even though Sarah was the only other person present. There are rooms in this palace that you have never seen, William. Vaults beneath the Tower of London that contain more than crown jewels. When you accept this ring, you accept access to all of that, along with the responsibility to protect it and eventually pass it on to your own heir. Sarah felt her breath catch. In all her years of palace service, she had occasionally wondered about the areas of the royal residences that seemed off-limits even to senior staff. Now she was learning that there were entire layers of royal life that existed in shadow. William reached toward the ring, then stopped. Papa, I need to ask you something directly. Is this about your health? Are you preparing for something you haven't told the family? Charles's expression softened with paternal warmth. My health is fine, William. This is about timing, about preparation, about ensuring continuity. Your mother and I have watched you grow into the man you are today. We've seen how you handle pressure, how you understand duty, how you put the crown before your personal desires. You're ready for this responsibility. But why now? Why not when I actually become king? Because the learning process takes time, Charles explained. When your grandmother gave me this ring, I was overwhelmed by everything that came with it. The knowledge, the responsibilities, the weight of 8 centuries of tradition. I don't want you to experience that overwhelming moment when you're also dealing with the grief of losing a parent and the immediate pressures of a new reign. William nodded slowly, beginning to understand. You want me to grow into it gradually. Over the next years, I'll gradually share with you the deeper knowledge that comes with this ring. You'll learn about the hidden aspects of kingship, the private ways we serve the nation that the public never sees. By the time you actually become king, you'll be fully prepared for every aspect of the role. Charles held the ring out toward his son. The question is, are you ready to accept this responsibility now? William looked at the ring, then at his father, then across the room where Sarah stood silently witnessing this extraordinary moment. She could see him weighing the decision, understanding that once he accepted the ring, there would be no going back. What exactly am I accepting? William asked. I need to understand the specifics before I can make this commitment. Charles smiled, clearly proud of his son's thoughtfulness. You're accepting the role of heir to more than just a throne. You're becoming the backup keeper of royal secrets, the alternate guardian of royal traditions. You'll have access to information that only the monarch typically possesses. You'll begin learning about the private networks that support the crown, the unofficial channels through which we sometimes work to serve the nation's interests. Are we talking about intelligence work? Government connections that aren't public? Among other things, yes. The British monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years, not just because of public ceremony and constitutional role, but because of our ability to work quietly behind the scenes when necessary. That work requires knowledge, contacts, and absolute discretion. William was quiet again, clearly processing the implications of what his father was describing. Sarah found herself holding her breath, realizing that she was witnessing a conversation that would shape the future of the British monarchy. The ring also represents something more personal, Charles continued. It's a symbol of the bond between the monarch and the heir, an acknowledgement that you understand the true cost of kingship, not just the privileges but the sacrifices. What kind of sacrifices are you referring to? Charles walked to the window, looking out at the London skyline beyond the palace walls. The sacrifice of ever being entirely private again. The sacrifice of putting the crown's needs above your own desires in every major decision. The sacrifice of carrying knowledge that you can never share, even with those closest to you. He turned back to William. When you accept this ring, you accept that your life will never again be entirely your own. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every relationship you form must be considered in light of your eventual role as king. It's a heavier burden than the public realizes. William looked down at his hands, then back at the ring. And if I'm not ready? If I need more time? Then you tell me honestly. And we wait, Charles said without hesitation. This ring has waited 800 years to find the right moments for passing. It can wait longer if necessary. But William, I believe you are ready. I've watched you handle crisis and pressure with remarkable grace. I've seen you put duty above personal desire consistently. I believe you understand what true service means. The room fell silent except for the distant sounds of London beyond the palace walls. Sarah realized she was witnessing one of the most important conversations in recent royal history, a moment that would never be recorded in any official document, but would shape the monarchy for decades to come. Finally, William stepped forward and extended his hand toward the ring. I accept the responsibility, Papa. I'm ready to learn whatever you need to teach me. Charles's face broke into a proud smile as he prepared to place the ancient ring on his son's finger. Then let us begin the ceremony that has bound our family together for 8 centuries. The atmosphere in the throne room shifted as Charles prepared to begin the ancient ceremony. Sarah watched from her position against the wall as the king took on an almost priestly demeanor, his movements becoming more formal and deliberate. This was no longer simply a father speaking to his son, but the continuation of a ritual that had bound the royal family together across 8 centuries. Before I place this ring on your finger, Charles said, his voice taking on a ceremonial tone that Sarah had never heard before. You must hear the words that have been spoken to every heir who has received it. These words have remained unchanged since the time of Henry III, passed down through oral tradition, never written, never recorded. William straightened his posture, understanding that he was about to participate in something truly ancient. Sarah found herself leaning forward slightly, straining to catch every word of what she instinctively knew would be one of the most significant moments of her life. Charles lifted the ring and held it between them, the deep blue stone catching the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. William Arthur Philip Lewis, Prince of Wales, do you understand that this ring represents not power over people, but service to them? I understand, William replied solemnly. Do you understand that wearing this ring means accepting that the needs of the crown and the British people will always come before your personal desires? I understand. Do you understand that this ring binds you to protect the secrets that have kept our monarchy strong, even if that protection requires personal sacrifice? And Sarah could see him truly grasping the weight of what he was accepting. I understand. Charles moved closer to his son, holding the ring just above William's left hand. Then hear now the words that have been spoken to every heir since the 13th century. The king's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but in the silence of the locked throne room, every word carried clearly to where Sarah stood. She realized that she was about to hear words that perhaps fewer than 50 people in the entire history of the British monarchy had ever heard. By this ring you accept the burden of tomorrow while I carry the burden of today. By this ring you promise to guard what must be guarded, to know what must be known, and to sacrifice what must be sacrificed for the continuity of our line and the service of our people. Charles slipped the ancient ring onto the ring finger of William's left hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for him specifically. Sarah noticed that both men's hands were trembling slightly with the emotion of the moment. By this ring, Charles continued, you become the keeper of the hidden crown, the guardian of the secret throne, the heir not just to public ceremony, but to private duty. You are no longer simply my son, but my partner in kingship. William stared down at the ring on his finger, his expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. The ancient gold seemed to glow against his skin, and Sarah could see that wearing it had already changed something in his bearing. Now, Charles said, his voice returning to its normal tone but maintaining its serious edge, I must share with you the first of the knowledge that comes with that ring. The king walked to what appeared to be a decorative panel on the wall near the main thrones. Sarah had looked at that panel hundreds of times during royal ceremonies but had never paid it particular attention. Charles pressed a specific point on the carved molding, and to Sarah's amazement, the panel slid aside to reveal a hidden compartment. From the compartment, Charles withdrew a leather-bound book that looked ancient beyond measure. The leather was dark with age, and the binding appeared to be held together by careful restoration work. He brought the book back to where William was standing, still staring at the ring on his finger. This is the Chronicle of the Sovereign's Ring, Charles explained, opening the book carefully. The pages were thick parchment, covered in handwriting that spanned different eras and different hands. Every person who has worn this ring has added their entry to this chronicle, recording the most significant moments of their time as keeper. William leaned forward to look at the book, his eyes widening as he recognized some of the names and dates. Is that Is that Queen Victoria's handwriting? And here, Charles pointed to another section, is your great-great-grandfather George V's entry from 1917, when he changed our family name from Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor. Sarah watched as William carefully turned the pages, seeing the private thoughts and experiences of monarchs who had shaped British history. The book contained information that no public historian had ever accessed, private reflections on decisions that had affected millions of lives. Your grandmother's entry, Charles said, turning to a page near the end of the book, was written just days before she gave me the ring. She wrote about the weight of keeping secrets, about the loneliness of carrying knowledge that couldn't be shared, but also about the deep satisfaction of knowing that her sacrifices had helped preserve the monarchy for future generations. William read his grandmother's words silently, his expression growing more serious with each line. Sarah could only imagine what Queen Elizabeth II had written about her 70 years of service, what private thoughts she had chosen to record for her successors. When you're ready, Charles said, you'll add your own entry to this chronicle. But that can wait. Today is about beginning your education, not completing it. Charles closed the book and returned it to the hidden compartment, then sealed the panel again. Sarah made a mental note of exactly which point he had pressed, understanding that this information might be crucial for her duties in serving both kings. Now, Charles said, turning back to his son, I want to show you something that very few people have ever seen. He led William to another section of the throne room that Sarah had always assumed was purely decorative. Charles knelt beside what appeared to be a solid marble base, supporting one of the room's grand columns. He pressed his new ring against a small indentation in the marble that Sarah would never have noticed if she hadn't been watching so intently. To her amazement, a section of the marble floor began to slide aside, revealing stone steps leading downward into darkness. Charles produced a small flashlight from his jacket pocket and began descending the hidden stairway, gesturing for William to follow. Sarah, Charles called back to her, please join us. You need to see this as well. Sarah approached the hidden entrance with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. In 15 years of palace service, she had never imagined that such secrets existed literally beneath her feet. She followed William down the stone steps, the beam of Charles's flashlight dancing ahead of them. The stairway led to a corridor that appeared to run directly beneath the main floor of the palace. The walls were original medieval stonework, much older than the palace's more familiar Baroque interiors. Electric lighting had been installed at some point, and Charles flipped a switch that illuminated the passage in warm yellow light. This corridor system, Charles explained as they walked, connects several important areas beneath the palace. Some of these passages date back to the original medieval structures that stood on this site. They were expanded and modified by various monarchs over the centuries. They passed several heavy wooden doors set into the stone walls. Each door bore a different royal cipher, indicating which monarch had installed or modified that particular chamber. Sarah noticed doors marked with the ciphers of George III, Victoria, George V, and Elizabeth II. What's behind these doors? William asked, his voice echoing slightly in the stone corridor. Different things for different purposes, Charles replied. Some contain archives of documents too sensitive for the royal archives. Others house artifacts that the public has never seen. One contains communication equipment that allows us to stay in contact with the government during extreme emergencies. They stopped at a door bearing Charles's own cipher, CIIIR. The king produced an ornate key from his jacket and unlocked the door, revealing a chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The room was part library, part museum, part office. The walls were lined with filing cabinets and bookshelves that appeared to contain thousands of documents and volumes. Display cases held artifacts that Sarah couldn't immediately identify, but that clearly held great significance. A large desk sat in the center of the room, surrounded by comfortable chairs and illuminated by sophisticated lighting that had obviously been recently installed. This is my private study, Charles explained. Every monarch since George III has maintained a similar chamber. This is where we handle the business that can't be conducted through normal government channels. William moved around the room slowly, examining the contents with growing amazement. Papa, what kind of business requires this level of secrecy? Charles joined his son near one of the display cases, which contained what appeared to be medieval documents sealed in protective glass. Sometimes the monarch needs to act as a private citizen rather than as head of state, when we need to communicate with foreign leaders outside of official diplomatic channels, for instance. Or when we need to preserve information that might be politically sensitive but historically important. He gestured toward the filing cabinets. Those contain records of private conversations with prime ministers going back 2 centuries. Not the official meetings that are recorded by government secretaries, but the personal discussions where political leaders have sought private advice or shared concerns they couldn't voice publicly. Sarah realized that she was looking at a parallel system of royal influence and responsibility that existed completely separate from the constitutional monarchy that the public understood. This was the private face of kingship, the behind-the-scenes work that helped maintain stability and continuity across political changes. There are similar chambers at Windsor, Balmoral, and Sandringham, Charles continued. As the keeper of the sovereign's ring, you'll have access to all of them. You'll gradually learn about the networks of people who help us maintain these capabilities, and eventually, you'll begin to use these resources yourself. William sat down in one of the chairs, still staring at the ring on his finger. This is overwhelming, Papa. The responsibility you're describing goes far beyond anything I imagined. Charles sat across from his son, his expression understanding but firm. I felt exactly the same way when your grandmother first brought me down here. But William, this is the real work of being king. The ceremonies and state occasions that the public sees are important. But this, he gestured around the chamber, this is how we actually serve the nation across decades and centuries. He leaned forward, his voice becoming more personal again. The ring you're wearing connects you to every monarch who has sat in that chair, who has wrestled with decisions that could affect the future of our country and our family. You're not alone in this responsibility. You're part of a continuous line of people who have dedicated their lives to something larger than themselves. William looked up at his father, then across at Sarah, who had remained silent throughout this extraordinary revelation. Sarah, what you've seen here today will never leave this room, Sarah said firmly. You have my absolute word. Charles smiled with approval. Sarah's discretion is one of the reasons I wanted her present today. In the coming months and years, she'll help coordinate your education in these matters. There's too much for me to share with you all at once, and having someone we both trust to help manage that process will be invaluable. As they prepared to leave the hidden chamber, Sarah understood that her life had just changed as dramatically as William's. She was no longer simply a palace administrator, but a keeper of royal secrets, a partner in preserving traditions that stretched back nearly a millennium. The weight of that responsibility was both terrifying and exhilarating as they climbed the stone steps back to the familiar world of the throne room above. Back in the throne room, the afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the red carpet and creating an almost ethereal atmosphere around the 2 men and their witness. Charles carefully sealed the hidden entrance to the underground chambers, and Sarah watched as the marble floor returned to its normal appearance, showing no trace of the extraordinary secrets that lay beneath. William stood near the thrones, still absorbing everything he had seen and learned. The sovereign's ring felt heavier on his finger now that he understood what it represented. Sarah could see that the weight was not physical but psychological, the burden of knowledge and responsibility that came with the ancient symbol. There's more I need to show you, Charles said, moving to another area of the room that Sarah had never suspected held secrets. He approached what appeared to be an ordinary bookshelf built into one of the walls between 2 large windows. Running his finger along the spine of what looked like a volume of Shakespeare, he found a hidden mechanism that caused the entire bookshelf to swing inward like a door. Sarah gasped softly despite herself. In 15 years of working in this room for various royal ceremonies and meetings, she had never imagined that it contained multiple hidden entrances. Behind the bookshelf was a narrow spiral staircase that appeared to lead upward into the palace's upper floors. This stairway, Charles explained as he began climbing, with William and Sarah following behind, connects to a series of private rooms that have been used by monarchs for centuries. These rooms exist completely outside the normal palace layout that the staff knows about. They climbed 2 floors, emerging into a corridor that Sarah definitely didn't recognize despite her extensive knowledge of the palace layout. The hallway was elegantly furnished but clearly private, with none of the grandeur of the public staterooms. Portraits of monarchs she recognized hung on the walls, but these were not the formal state portraits familiar to the public. These appeared to be more personal paintings, showing the royal family in private moments. Charles led them to a door at the end of the corridor and opened it to reveal what was clearly his most private study. Unlike the underground chamber they had visited earlier, this room felt warm and personal. Family photographs sat on the desk alongside what appeared to be personal correspondence. Bookshelves held volumes that ranged from history to philosophy to literature, clearly chosen for personal interest rather than official purposes. "This is where I come when I need to think as Charles rather than as king," he explained, settling into a comfortable chair near a fireplace that showed signs of regular use. Every monarch has maintained such a space, somewhere to be human rather than symbolic. William examined the room with obvious interest, his eyes settling on a particular photograph on his father's desk. It showed Queen Elizabeth II as a young woman holding a baby that was clearly Charles himself. But what caught his attention was that in the photograph, she was wearing the sovereign's ring. "She wore it even then?" William asked, pointing to the image. "She wore it from the moment her father gave it to her in 1952, just after his death," Charles confirmed. "She never took it off except to pass it to me. That ring was part of her for 70 years. Charles moved to a filing cabinet and withdrew a folder marked only with the current year. "William, I want to share something with you that will help you understand the practical reality of what you've accepted today." He opened the folder to reveal what appeared to be correspondence between himself and various world leaders, but these letters bore no official government letterheads. The stationery was personal, and the tone of the correspondence was clearly informal, despite the significant political topics being discussed. "Last month," Charles said, "the President of France reached out to me privately about concerns regarding European economic policy. Not through diplomatic channels, not as part of any official negotiation, but as one head of state seeking private counsel from another." William read over the correspondence with growing understanding. He wanted advice that he couldn't seek through normal political channels. Sometimes political leaders need someone to talk through difficult decisions with, someone who understands the pressures of leadership but exists outside their normal political environment. The British monarch has served that role for world leaders for centuries. Charles showed William several other examples. A private letter from the Prime Minister of Canada seeking advice about handling a constitutional crisis. Correspondence with the Japanese Emperor about maintaining traditional values in a rapidly modernizing world. And even a personal note from the President of the United States asking for perspective on handling media scrutiny of his family. "This is the kind of private diplomacy that the ring represents," Charles explained. "It's not about political power or influence in the traditional sense. It's about being a constant, stable presence that other leaders can turn to when they need perspective from someone who truly understands the burdens of public service." Sarah realized that she was learning about an entirely different dimension of royal responsibility, one that existed parallel to the constitutional role that the public understood. This was personal leadership on a global scale. Relationships built over decades that helped maintain international stability in ways that would never appear in any official government record. "The knowledge that comes with this ring," Charles continued, "includes understanding these relationships, knowing who can be trusted, learning how to provide counsel without overstepping political boundaries." William set down the correspondence and looked directly at his father. "Papa, what you're describing sounds like a lifetime of education. How am I supposed to learn all of this while also handling my current responsibilities?" Charles smiled, clearly having anticipated this question, gradually and with help. "Sarah will coordinate much of your education, working with me to gradually introduce you to different aspects of this role. We'll start with the most basic knowledge and build from there." He turned to Sarah, who had been listening intently to every word. "Sarah, your role is about to expand significantly. In addition to your current responsibilities, you'll be managing William's education in these matters. That will require access to information and resources that have been restricted until now." Sarah felt both honored and nervous about the expansion of her duties. Your Majesty, I'm committed to handling whatever responsibilities you need me to take on. I know you are, Charles said warmly, and I want you to understand that this expanded role comes with expanded privileges as well. You'll have access to these private areas of the palace. You'll be privy to correspondence and information that even senior palace officials don't see. Most importantly, you'll have my complete trust, and William's as well. Charles moved to his desk and withdrew two identical small devices that looked like sophisticated mobile phones but clearly weren't standard commercial models. These are secure communication devices, he explained, handing one to William and one to Sarah. They're connected to a private network that allows encrypted communication between holders of the sovereign's ring and their most trusted advisors. William examined the device with interest. How many people have access to this network? Currently, fewer than a dozen worldwide, Charles replied. Myself, you as of today, the monarchs of several other countries who maintain similar traditions, and a small number of completely trusted advisors like Sarah. Sarah held her device carefully, understanding that she was now part of an exclusive global network of people who helped maintain the hidden aspects of monarchical responsibility. The weight of that trust was profound. The network is used for coordination during international crises, Charles continued, for sharing information that needs to remain completely confidential, and for maintaining the relationships that I showed you in that correspondence. Charles returned to his filing cabinet and withdrew another folder, this one considerably thicker than the first. This contains profiles of the key people you'll need to know in your new role. Some are public figures that you'll recognize, but others operate entirely in private. Learning who these people are and how to work with them will be one of your first educational priorities. William opened the folder and began reading, his expression growing more serious as he absorbed the information. Sarah could see names and photographs, along with detailed notes about relationships and areas of expertise. This was clearly a sophisticated network of individuals who supported the hidden work of the monarchy. Some of these people, Charles explained, have been serving our family for decades. Others are newer additions to the network. What they all have in common is absolute discretion and complete dedication to preserving the stability and continuity that the monarchy provides. As William continued reading, Charles moved to a wall safe hidden behind one of the personal photographs on his desk. The safe required both a combination and what appeared to be a fingerprint scan. From inside, he withdrew several thick documents bound in leather covers. These, he said, placing the documents on his desk, are the most sensitive files you'll ever see. They contain information about potential threats to the monarchy, about individuals or organizations that might seek to undermine our role or exploit our position for their own purposes. William looked up from the folder he had been reading, clearly surprised by this revelation. Threats beyond what our official security handles? Different kinds of threats, Charles clarified. Our official security protects us from physical danger and handles traditional security concerns. But there are other threats to the monarchy that require different approaches, financial schemes that might damage our reputation, political movements that seek to use us as symbols for causes we cannot support, individuals who might try to exploit their access to royal circles for inappropriate purposes. Charles opened one of the leather-bound documents, revealing detailed intelligence reports about various individuals and organizations. This information comes through private networks that exist separately from official government intelligence. These networks help us identify and address potential problems before they become public scandals or security issues. Sarah realized that the royal family maintained their own private intelligence capabilities, another hidden layer of their operational structure that the public would never suspect. The sophistication and scope of these private systems was extraordinary. Learning to evaluate and respond to these kinds of threats, Charles said to William, will be another crucial part of your education. The decisions we make in response to potential threats can have long-term consequences for the monarchy's effectiveness and reputation. William closed the folder he had been reading and looked at the pile of leather-bound documents. This is more complex than running a small government, he observed. In many ways, it is, Charles agreed. But remember, you're not inheriting all of this responsibility immediately. You're beginning a gradual process of learning and preparation that will unfold over years. By the time you actually need to manage all of these systems independently, they'll be as familiar to you as your current duties are now. Charles began gathering the sensitive documents, preparing to return them to the safe. For now, I want you to focus on beginning to understand the scope of what this role involves. Over the coming weeks, Sarah will arrange for you to meet some of the key people in our networks, to begin learning about the different systems we maintain, and to start developing your own judgment about how to handle the various challenges that will arise. As the afternoon drew toward evening, Sarah realized that this extraordinary day was beginning to wind down, but she also understood that for both herself and William, this day represented the beginning of an entirely new phase of their lives and responsibilities. As the shadows lengthened in the hidden study, Charles began the process of formally concluding the ceremony that had transformed both William and Sarah's understanding of their roles within the monarchy. The king moved to his desk and withdrew a final document from a locked drawer, this one bearing the royal seal but clearly intended for private rather than official use. "William," Charles said, his voice taking on the ceremonial tone that had marked the beginning of their afternoon together, "there are final words that must be spoken to complete the passing of the sovereign's ring." William straightened in his chair, the ancient ring catching the lamplight as he folded his hands in his lap. Sarah remained at her position near the bookshelves, understanding that she was about to witness the conclusion of a ritual that had bound the royal family together for 8 centuries. Charles held the sealed document between them. "These are the final obligations and privileges that come with the ring you now wear. Some of these you will exercise immediately, others only when circumstances require them, and some only when you pass the ring to your own heir." He broke the seal and unfolded the document, revealing text written in what appeared to be both English and Latin, with calligraphy that suggested great age and formality. "By accepting the sovereign's ring, you accept the obligation to preserve the crown's ability to act independently of political pressure when the nation's fundamental interests are at stake." William listened intently as his father continued reading from the ancient document. "You accept the privilege of direct communication with the sovereign heads of other nations, independent of diplomatic protocol when circumstances require immediate and confidential consultation." The words were formal and archaic, but Sarah could understand their practical implications. William was being granted authorities and responsibilities that existed entirely outside the public understanding of how the monarchy functioned. "You accept the obligation to maintain the private networks that support the Crown's ability to gather information, provide assistance, and exercise influence in service of the British people's long-term welfare." Charles paused in his reading and looked directly at his son. "These are not empty ceremonial words, William. These are actual responsibilities that you may need to exercise during your lifetime. The networks I've shown you today, the communication systems, the intelligence capabilities, the international relationships, all of these exist to enable you to fulfill these obligations." William nodded gravely. "I understand, Papa. I accept these responsibilities. You accept the privilege of access to resources, information, and capabilities maintained by the Crown independently of government oversight, for the purpose of ensuring the monarchy's ability to serve the nation across changes in political leadership." Sarah realized that she was hearing a formal description of the parallel systems of royal authority that she had glimpsed throughout the afternoon. These were not constitutional powers in the traditional sense, but private capabilities that the monarchy had developed and maintained across centuries. "Finally," Charles said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you accept the obligation to pass these responsibilities, privileges, and capabilities to your own heir when the time comes, ensuring the continuity of the Crown's service across generations yet unborn." Charles refolded the document and placed it in William's hands. "This document will remain in your possession until you pass the ring to your own child. It serves as a reminder of the commitments you've made today and a guide for the obligations that will shape the rest of your life." William accepted the document with obvious reverence, understanding its significance. "Where should I keep it?" "Wherever you feel it will be safest and most accessible to you," Charles replied. "Some monarchs have kept it in their most private study, others in a personal safe. The important thing is that you have access to it whenever you need to remind yourself of the full scope of your responsibilities." Charles moved to another part of the room and withdrew a small wooden case, similar to the one that had held the sovereign's ring, but smaller and simpler. From inside, he took what appeared to be a key made of the same ancient gold as the ring, with intricate engravings that matched the ring's design. "This is the master key," Charles explained, holding it up to the light. It provides access to all of the private areas we've visited today, as well as similar facilities at our other residences. As the holder of the Sovereign's Ring, you now have the right to access any of these areas independently. He handed the key to William, who examined its detailed engravings with fascination. The key also serves as identification within our private networks. When you meet with the people Sarah will introduce you to over the coming weeks, this key will serve as proof of your authority to access the information and resources they manage. Sarah watched as William carefully placed both the document and the key in his jacket pocket, understanding that he was taking physical possession of tools that would shape his destiny for decades to come. Charles turned to Sarah with a warm smile. Sarah, your role in today's ceremony is not yet complete. There are final commitments I need from you as well. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she realized that she too was about to be bound by formal obligations to protect what she had witnessed. By your presence here today, Charles began, you have become a keeper of royal secrets, a guardian of royal traditions, and a partner in royal service that extends far beyond your official duties. Are you prepared to accept the obligations that come with that role? Yes, Your Majesty. I am prepared. Then I need you to swear, on your honor and on your loyalty to the crown, that you will protect the secrets you have learned today with your life. That you will serve William in his new role with the same discretion and dedication you have shown to me, and that you will train your own successor when the time comes, ensuring that these capabilities are preserved for future generations. I swear, Your Majesty, Sarah said firmly, on my honor and my loyalty to the crown, to fulfill all of these obligations. Charles nodded with obvious satisfaction. Then you too have a key to bear. He produced a third key from the wooden case, smaller than William's but clearly made from the same ancient gold and bearing similar engravings. This key provides access to the areas and information you'll need to fulfill your expanded responsibilities. Guard it well. And Sarah accepted the key with hands that trembled slightly from the emotion of the moment. She was no longer simply a palace employee, but a true insider, trusted with the deepest secrets of the monarchy, and given the tools to help preserve them for the future. Now, Charles said, moving toward the door, we should return to the throne room to conclude our ceremony properly. They made their way back through the hidden corridors and down the spiral staircase, emerging once again into the grand formality of the throne room. The afternoon light had faded to early evening, and the room's electric lights had automatically illuminated, creating a warm, golden atmosphere. Charles stood between the two thrones and gestured for William to join him. Sarah remained near the wall where she had begun this extraordinary afternoon, but now she felt like a participant rather than simply an observer. William, Charles said, his voice carrying clearly across the vast room, look at your hand. William raised his left hand, examining the sovereign's ring in the golden light of the chandeliers. The ancient gold seemed to glow with an inner fire, and the deep blue stone appeared to hold depths of mystery and knowledge. That ring connects you to every monarch who has worn it before you, Charles said. When you look at it, remember that you are not alone in bearing its responsibilities. You are part of an unbroken chain of service that stretches back 800 years and forward into a future we cannot yet imagine. William nodded, clearly moved by the gravity of his father's words. Sarah, Charles said, turning to address her directly, you have witnessed something today that few people in the history of our nation have ever seen. You have heard words that have been spoken in private for centuries, and you have accepted responsibilities that will shape the rest of your life. How do you feel about that burden? Sarah considered her words carefully before responding. Your Majesty, I feel honored beyond measure to be trusted with such responsibility. I also feel the weight of that trust and my determination to prove worthy of it. Charles smiled with obvious approval. I believe you will more than prove worthy, Sarah. The years ahead will bring challenges that none of us can anticipate, and having someone we can trust completely to help us navigate those challenges is invaluable. The king moved to the hidden panel where he had retrieved the Chronicle of the Sovereign's Ring earlier that afternoon. Once again, he pressed the concealed mechanism and withdrew the ancient leather-bound book. Before we conclude today's ceremony, Charles said, I want to make the first entry that includes both the passing of the ring and the witnessing by a trusted advisor. He opened the book to a blank page and began writing with a fountain pen that appeared to be as old as the book itself. Sarah could see him dating the entry and beginning to record the events of the afternoon in careful formal script. "William," Charles said as he wrote, "in the days to come you'll begin to understand more fully what you've accepted today. There will be moments when the weight of the responsibility feels overwhelming, and there will be moments when you'll question whether you're capable of fulfilling such a significant role." He paused in his writing to look directly at his son. "In those moments, remember that every person who has worn that ring has experienced the same doubts, the same sense of being overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they've accepted. What matters is not the absence of doubt, but the commitment to service despite the doubt." Charles completed his entry in the Chronicle and showed it to William before closing the book. "Your first entry should wait until you've had time to absorb what you've learned today and to begin exercising your new responsibilities. But when you're ready, that book will be waiting for your thoughts and experiences." As Charles returned the Chronicle to its hiding place and sealed the panel once more, Sarah realized that the formal ceremony was drawing to a close. But she also understood that in many ways, the real work was just beginning. "The three of us," Charles said, looking at both William and Sarah, "are now bound together by shared knowledge and shared responsibility. In the years ahead, we'll work together to ensure that the monarchy continues to serve the British people with the dedication and effectiveness it has maintained for nearly a millennium." He moved to the door of the throne room and unlocked it, allowing the sounds of the bustling palace to filter back into their private world. "Tomorrow, Sarah, you'll begin coordinating William's education in his new role. Start with introducing him to the most essential people in our networks and the most basic systems he needs to understand." Charles turned to William one final time. "And tomorrow, you'll begin learning what it truly means to be a king, not just in the public ceremonies and constitutional duties, but in the private service that few people understand or appreciate." As they prepared to leave the throne room and return to their public roles, Sarah looked back at the grand space where she had witnessed such extraordinary events. She knew that she would never again look at this room, or at the monarchy itself, in quite the same way. The sovereign's ring gleamed on William's finger as they walked toward the door, a reminder that the ancient institution they served was far more complex, far more sophisticated, and far more enduring than the world would ever know. Sarah felt privileged to be part of preserving that continuity for future generations, and committed to proving worthy of the extraordinary trust that had been placed in her.